Beauty and Truth started out as a project really where I wanted to bring a bit of soul back into portrait photography. The digital revolution has been fantastic for professional photographers because what it means is that we can achieve a huge amount very, very quickly. The downside of it is that because everybody uses the same software and it's very difficult to resist what that software can do, people tend to get airbrushed to hell and end up looking the same. What I wanted to do was go back to my film roots and leave the sitters alone as much as possible. Within a very short space of time, I had a lot of gardeners on my list, and what became particularly apparent was just how generous they were. I was shooting James Alexander-SINCLAIR early on, and I mentioned this, that gardeners seem to be very generous, but in addition to that, something that was really starting to come through was that they had this healing sort of through line. Either they were healers or they had been healed. And I said to James that this seemed like something that was worth celebrating. He mercifully agreed with me and said, well, why don't we do it at Chelsea? And here I am. My own version of healing green, I would say, comes through trees. I've long had a love of trees, and when I was a farmer, I took great pleasure in living by the Chinese maxim of happy is the man who plants a tree in whose shade he knows he'll never sit. Whether it's simply being out in the garden, planting seeds at this time of year, tending to my roses, taking rose cuttings, planting pear trees, or whether it's just out walking on the estate and just taking in the ancient energy of the land. I'd love to think that I live healing green most days. There are an extraordinary number of people out there who are doing extraordinary work. Now, they can range from the very famous through to the totally unknown. But they're all trying to make life, people, the world a better place through all things green, through gardening, through horticulture, through whatever. And that's really what I want to celebrate here at Healing Green, is that work that's going on. It's that sense of wanting to make the world a better place. My name's Chaz Oldham. I'm a professional photographer, and this is Beauty and Truth Healing Green. James is a well-known figure to people who watch the Chelsea Flower Show coverage. He always appears in his trademark hat, usually defending the judging up on the perch of shame. I think he's a hugely unsung hero within the horticultural world. He firmly believes in the healing power of all things green, to democratize gardening and get young people interested in it and spread its reaches far and wide. One of the great things about meeting Alan Titchmarsh was the discovery that he's absolutely the same off-screen as on. I did want to step away from the showbiz Alan, and he was really willing to do that, to the extent that he said, well, this is a hat that I use when I try and go incognito around London. I called him the Kindly Sheriff series, because he just looks like something out of the old Wild West. Frances was one of my favourite sitters. I could have carried on shooting her for days because, again, like a lot of people in the gardening world, she was wide open. And that just makes it very, very easy to shoot. When people aren't guarded or defended, they tend to give you their soul pretty quick. People seem to be a little bit afraid of bright, switched on women. And I thought we should be unapologetic about that. I'd like to think that I celebrated her intelligence. Sir Tim Smith, my choice of him was a very personal one because my own green journey really began at Heligan. They'd taken this land which had become derelict and they'd healed it. They'd healed this place. It was the first time that I'd had the sort of insight as to what you could do in a garden. You could take pretty much any space and green it. And by the simple act of doing that, it would just make you feel better. Adam's work is well known around the world. He's a multiple Chelsea Gold winner. And I think anybody who looks at the kind of gardens that he creates will see that he likes to heal through beauty. He just brings beauty into the world. These are people who deserve to be celebrated. They risk their lives for us. Simon Jakeman and Matt Rosendale are two extraordinary men, humbling men, as were the rest of the Green Watch. The genius of Brixton Fire Station is that they have a mindfulness garden on the roof, and it's somewhere that anybody can go from any of the 4 watches that they have to decompress. Roy is a national treasure. Like so many people in Heligan Green, just generous when it comes to trying to communicate what plants can do. He sort of sucks up the life force from around him and tries to communicate that to you, what it can do for you in exactly the same way as it's done for him. I am a huge fan of Sue Biggs. What I wanted to capture with Sue was the 2 elements of her personality that seem to get lost in the normal portraits of her. And that's the sense of fun that she has, and that's obvious to anybody who ever meets her. And then also it's that steel that enables her to run a £90 million organisation whilst at the same time remaining hugely popular. Andy is a naughty schoolboy. I mean, obviously he's a hugely successful designer. What I wanted to try and get at in a portrait of him was how he can have made sense of tragedy and moved on. He's been through a lot, Gardening, I know, helped him on that journey. And he hasn't tried to exclude that. He hasn't tried to pretend that never happened. Chris Beardshaw is an extraordinary man for a number of reasons. He was so far ahead of the curve in terms of healing and gardens. It informs all of his work. He was talking about gardens, and just even having a green view could be a healing thing. And I think that sensibility has informed his work. He's a hugely successful garden designer, and the beauty in his work is healing enough. Matt KEIGHTLEY earns his spurs for healing green in any number of ways. He works with Help for Heroes on their gardens. He did a healing garden last year at Chelsea, and he's also doing a healing garden at WHILEY. When Matt came to sit, he was quite nervous, and so what I wanted to try and get from him in a portrait was what was sitting behind that fear. Olivia lost her son, Horatio, in a polar bear attack in the Arctic. Most people would have reacted to a tragedy like that by just going within, turning within. And the extraordinary thing about her is that she has turned her grief and that tragedy into a life's work. And that's manifested itself in Horatio's garden. What I wanted to capture in the portrait with Lady C is her sense of fun, how passionate Lady Carnarvon is about all things green and the outdoors. She sees green as an opportunity to make people's lives better, and that's manifested in a healing herb garden that she had put into HIGHCLERE some years ago. Arit's one of those people who just makes you feel better about everything, about being alive, about being you. There's something about her perma smile and her interest in everything and everybody, which just leaves a warm feeling in her wake. It's the Arit effect. Cleve is one of the most generous, humble, nice people I've ever met. Basically, the Dalai Lama's brother turned up and instantly made everything all right. His place in Healing Green is earned over and over again simply by the fact that his presence alone is healing. You feel somehow healed by having spent any degree of time in his company. Not only is Dan Pearson one of the world's most famous garden designers, and rightly so, he's also a class act. Bless him, he had totally forgotten that I was due to come and shoot his portrait, and I turned up. And after admitting to the fact that he'd forgotten about me, he then proceeded to say, just because I've forgotten about it, please don't feel rushed, and then gave me 3 hours of his time. Mark Lane is a hugely inspiring man by anybody's measure. Diagnosed with spina bifida in his 30s, he then had a car crash which put him in a wheelchair. He somehow had the strength of character to turn that tragedy into horticultural advantage. tirelessly works with charities like Groundwork and Thrive to make sure that his own healing experience through green can be transmitted to others. Dr. Jim Sikorsky and the Sydenham Garden Project are two people who should be celebrated, and I would love to think that I'm helping celebrate them here. Jim is a reluctant hero. He was one of the first GPs to prescribe gardening on the NHS and realise the healing value of horticulture. And in Sydenham Garden Project, what he has helped create is an extraordinary organisation that just seeks to look after the vulnerable. Guy Watson is the founder of Riverford Vegetables, and for many years when he first started out was considered a freak on the fringe because of his views on organic agriculture. He makes it into healing green because he looks after the planet. He is a fabulous character, and what I wanted to get out of a portrait with him was just that sense of single-mindedness. Marian is one of those extraordinary people who is quite happy to say that healing is at the core of every single project that she undertakes in her landscape business. She was one of those people who it was just healing to be in her presence. She's a really generous soul, puts you at ease, and was just a total pleasure to shoot. Davies White are a duo, a design duo, Andre and Adam. And they started off in the charitable world, and they specialise in creating fun spaces for children. And it was really that sense of fun, that sort of impish, naughty, schoolboy, schoolgirl sense of fun that I wanted to capture in our time together as we wandered around WHILEY. And I think I did. And it didn't need much encouragement from them. They were more than happy to play the part. Sarah Price is one of those female garden designers who suffer from the wispy meadow syndrome. I wanted to access something that we hadn't necessarily seen before, and as soon as I found out that she had a background in ballet, we started to allow her to express that. That amplified her fine art background, and I think we got something completely different. Jo Whiley is not only incredibly trendy, but she's also a very, very keen gardener, which comes as a surprise to a lot of people. She had a tough time last year being able to come back to her garden and simply sink her hands into warm soil was healing and helped her deal with a very difficult time. What I like to think that we captured with Jo was that sense of thoughtfulness and intelligence that's at her core. FLO HEADLAM, my main goal was to get her out of her glasses. I know from personal experience what glasses can do. They enable you to hide and they can sometimes obscure. But the transformation wrought with FLO was extraordinary. She became this totally different being, and by the end of the session was almost unrecognizable from her gardener's world persona. Joe's sense of fun is well known, that's part of his broadcasting persona, but he's a very thoughtful man, and I think that thoughtfulness had been amplified by the recent death of his father. What I wanted to do was just touch upon how that had affected him, and he was fabulous. He let us in, he let us see that, and you can absolutely see that sense of loss and that sense of almost loneliness that you get when you lose your father. Darren Hawkes' Maggie's Garden a couple of years ago at Chelsea was one of the best Chelsea gardens I've ever seen. Maggie's Garden is for a cancer charity and was designed to heal. I was even more interested to discover shortly before I shot him that he, like me, is an actor. And as the shoot went on, he allowed more and more of his generous soul just to pour out, so that by the end we got an insight into the man who designed a healing garden.